Hi, I'm Doug Vogt from the Dihole Foundation, and the reason why it's taken me, was it 6 months, 7 months, to finally do a new video is because I was in the hospital from about August 23rd to October 6th with COVID-19, the D version, and then 14 days after that in rehab. So I came home, I was coughing a lot. If I clear my throat during this video, please be understanding. And, I got a number of calls when I was there, and I'll go through some of them. But this video is going to cover basically the source of electrons that are mentioned by the electric universe. It's like many theories, some parts are right and some parts are wrong. But I'm giving them a foundation of where the electrons do come. They are there. The thing is, it's a much bigger story, really what's being shown. Now, this is part 10 in series 1. The next series, part 11 in the series, is going to deal with, I believe I figured out how entities go back in time. So I have to present this stuff first, so you have a foundation of what's really going on, how it's being done. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to go through the scientists who, really big names in physics, that knew something was wrong, but they didn't have this information theory or computer analogy to really figure it all out. The other ones are, I present the 5 scientific points that prove the universe is the product of information. Source of the electrons of the electric universe, and how the atoms, how it forms the excess electrons in the center of the Earth and the stars. And that's it. So, Thomas Rossier had written to me, and the reason I got permission from him to print out his email to me. And I had sent off an email to all of people who subscribe and send me an email that are on my list. What happened to me, so this is kind of typical of what I've gotten from a lot of people. Like many others, I owe you and your videos for awakening me as to what is going on in our world, and that we are all being lied to. Boy, I ain't kidding on that one. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I understand why they did it. That's actually pretty important. Certainly hiding the fact of they're building those survival caves and what they spent, I can understand that. The religious stuff, I can't. And once you start lying, it's almost impossible to turn that ship around. Looking forward to your next video to help guide us at this difficult time in our world. Also, thanks to August Dunning, who called me up when I was in the hospital a couple of times. And it was nice of him. And he told me also Ben Davidson wished me well also, which was nice. So anyway, I want to thank all those well over 300 or 400 people who sent me emails thanking me, and also glad I survived it. These are the books I'll be teaching from, but there's some new stuff in this video also. The one addition is this research I got from Japanese scientists. The books are all in Japanese. The pictures are good, and I'll cover it when I get to his stuff later, but it was very, very good. Creation of the Hebrew alphabet, you'll see why. And Thelma Moss's book, I knew her, and she signed my book. I was living in Los Angeles at the same time. She was at UCLA in the psychology department. Anyway, I got her, that book, and the last one she did is this one here, The Body Electric. Okay, this part is basically the scientist. Now, I have a reference here, video series 1, part 1A, and these videos and the ones following, a few, will be found there. But what I'm trying to show you here is the biggest names in physics, the biggest, knew something was wrong. Sir Arthur Eddington, Nobel Prize winner, English scientist, very good. And again, his conclusion was the idea of a universal mind or logos would be, I think, a fairly plausible inference from the present state of science theory. The stuff of the world is mind stuff. Now, for some of these, if you replace the word mind or consciousness with the word information, you realize he's saying the same thing, but they didn't have computer analogies to connect it. I think if computers were around at the time these great men were active, they probably would have figured out the same thing I did. Heisenberg, Werner Heisenberg. He's the creator of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The atoms or elements, particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. Max Planck, as in Planck's constant, Planck's time. Without his work, you wouldn't have quantum mechanics. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. If you replace consciousness with information, you'd have it. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. I think the people who came up with the movie The Matrix probably borrowed from his quote. But you can see he's saying the same thing. Unfortunately, they couldn't go beyond that. Niels Bohr, Bohr model of the atom, in case you don't know. Everything we call real is made up of things that cannot be regarded as real. I love that. James Jeans, the universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. Again, replace thought with information. Mind no longer appears as an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We are beginning to suspect that we ought to rather to hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter. We suspect the universe is all waves and nothing but waves. Feynman gave a lecture basically saying the same thing. Lisa Mullion. What's interesting about him, he's the first one who winds up mentioning Aristotle. A successful unification of quantum theory and relativity would necessarily be a theory of the universe as a whole. It would tell us, as Aristotle and Newton did before, what space and time are, what the cosmos is, what things are made of, and what kind of laws those things obey. Such a theory would bring about a radical shift, a revolution, in our understanding of what nature is. Albert Einstein. Enough people bow down and pray to this guy, and you see a very smart man. I must confess that I was unable to find an explanation for the atomic character of nature. One must find a way to avoid the space-time continuum altogether, though I haven't the slightest idea what kind of elementary concept would be used in such a theory. I think he died in 1955, but he was obviously reflecting on his work and what was happening in quantum mechanics. Then we have Stephen Hawking. I don't know if I'd list him as a great scientist, great mathematician, but like I covered in video series 1 part 1H, towards the end of his life, specifically this journal article, this is not written by him, but in the reference, it mentions holograms. This is the key part here. If means conditional statements. And as you see his works go down, you'll see he starts mentioning holograms more and more. Now, I have all his journal articles, except I don't think I have this one. This is the one, A Smooth Exit from Eternal Inflation, last paper published after his death. Kind of cowardly, I'd say. Never mentions black holes. He really gave up on the black hole stuff, black hole radiation, everything. Holograms, 28 times. He must have finally figured out that the universe, like the other scientists, is more like information than it is a matter-type situation where you're trying to say there's a black hole someplace. Remember, the idea and the concept of black hole was done by, or came up with, by Charles Field. I think it was German mathematician a month after Einstein came up with the general theory of relativity. Shortly thereafter, he went to the Eastern Front in the German army and died from, I think, gassing. But the point is Schwarzschild, that was his name, Schwarzschild. Now, this is an article that was published. There are no black holes. You see, even he changed before his death. This is in 2014. It goes into no singularity, black holes and stuff like that. Hawking's told Nature, quantum theory, however, enables energy and information to escape from a black hole. A full explanation of the process, the physicists admit, would require a theory that successfully merges gravity with other fundamental forces of nature. But that is a goal that has eluded physicists for nearly a century. The correct treatment, Hawking says, remains a mystery. They all knew something was wrong. They didn't connect in their heads. It was the foundation philosophy that they were all a victim of. Now you're going to understand the reason why Schmolian mentioned Aristotle. He was correct in that. Because Aristotle, works of Aristotle, this is Plato. The idea of an apple, or let's say the information of an apple, and then you have the manifestation in our dimension of a physical apples. Aristotle, who you think existed, well, he did, but he was an admiral in Alexander the Great's navy. You'll find out in a second. World of form and matter are one and the same. Now, the reason why he did it is you're going to find out. It's in video series 12, part 1. Part 2 is the reason why they did it. This is the only mention of Aristotle in Greek writing, not a Roman writing in Greek, as Greek. History of Peloponnesian War, Loeb's Classes 109, pages 186 and 187. They also sent Demosthenes, who had led the army of the Athenians, into there. Anyway, the other person there, which happened to be off the coast, the Athenian, 20 Athenian ships off the coast of Peloponnesus, under the command of Aristotle, son of, and tells the rest of his relatives, for Yiddish is called Mishpucha. So this is the only mention, but he's an admiral in Alexander the Great's navy. This is Diogenes Laertes. That was one of his names. There are 8 Aristotles. You got that? I want it to sink in. You think it's one person? No. Probably some of the geography stuff was written by the original Aristotle as an admiral traveling out, traveling around and seeing towns and cities and stuff like that. And he writes about it. But the rest of it, the philosophy part, forget it. The one who wrote it, you're going to find out. Or watch video series 12, part 1. Get an education. Our philosopher himself, nonsense. An Athenian statesman, that's Cicero. A scholar who commented on Iliad. I don't know if I really want to say that right now. Marcus Calpurnius Piso was the father of Arius Calpurnius Piso, a Sicilian rhetorician who had wrote a reply to, I can't even pronounce it, and Igratus. It goes on to all of them. I identified in part 12 all of them. This is who they are: Cicero, Marcus C. Piso, Arius Calpurnius Piso, Arian, aka Arianus, aka Sextus. This Arian became emperor. It was Arius's grandson through his adopted daughter Claudia Phoebe. Galen, who wrote the medical stuff in Aristotle. He's the father of Roman medicine, basically. Diogenes Laertes, him. Ulpian and Origen. The reason why he was able to write and his writings, this didn't get destroyed, is because he was the emperor, therefore they couldn't destroy his writings. And the last one, Eusebius. This is the guy you can blame for the philosophy part of changing it. This is really statues of him. It was Arius, Calpurnius, Piso. This is of Apollo. The statue says Apollo by Apollonius. Apollonius means son of God. Gee, I wonder who that could possibly be. Then this is Ares, the statue of Ares, but it's the same face, as you could tell. Ares was the Greek god of war. Arius is derived from Ares. His mother's name was Aria Jr., also feminine version of Ares. This is Apollo at the Vatican. Again, it's him. The reason why they have this not up ahead on the top of his head, because his mother was, Aria Jr. was in the Temple of Vesta, and she was the head virgin, which enabled her to put this little bun thing on top of her head. They had a unique hairdressing they had. Here's one of Plutarch, which was also Piso, same guy. So we have marble statues of him. Now this is, it says Numa, as in Numa Pompilia, but it's really the face of Arius Calpurnius Piso, second king of Rome. Nobody knew what Numa Pompilia looked like because it was like 700 years before Piso and what they were doing. So he put his own face there. And the same face shows up in the Vatican. You'll see, and if you watch part 2 of video series 12, it'll be a good shocker for you. As they say, they hide it in plain sight. Okay, to tell you how crazy and evil this guy was, you go into vectorpub.com/Satan. I got a shock for you. He's the one who created the name and the concept Satan. I explained how he did it. He went back and derived things from the Iliad of a Greek philosopher from the Isle of Crete called Minos. He liked Minos because Minos in Greek small numbering was 19, and so was Piso in Greek small numbering, total 19. When you watch that, then you'll understand what's going on and how sick this guy really was. Okay, now the 5 scientific things. This is called hard facts that you wind up testing that prove the universe is the product of information. The first one, 1989, I found the 6 blank periods in space. This is where they are. 4 of the 6 were 12,068 light years apart from the beginning of a blank period to the beginning of the next one. So, and it's video series 1, part 1b, and part 1. Video series 4, part 1. I gave my database to August Dunning, wanted to test it. He's a PhD in physics, used to work at JPL, and so I gave him my database, my complete database of all, I did a database of all known stars, open clusters and globular clusters in our galaxy. And he did it, he took the stuff, and this is what he came up with. And he in fact found the 6 blank periods just like I said. I did this picture so you understand what they're really looking at. You don't see the stars here, even though there's millions of them, where these black bands are, because after the nova, the dust shell around it conceals it for a while. The other part I could probably include as another one. 8 sunspot cycles is 1 Gleisberg cycle, 88.73 plus years, times 136 is 12,068 years. So, resynchronizing frequency, synchronizing frequency, all geared to the main clock cycle. Use a computer analogy because that's exactly what we're dealing with. Part 2, Number two, I had linked carbon-14 dating for marine muds and other non-organic material from around the world, from the journals. This is the journal Nature, the volume, the page number, the date. It's in God's Judgement book, chapter 8. 24,000 years. I also had 36 and 48,000. So you're looking at 4 cycles. Here's organic material, wood, peat, shell, peat, organic material. Same thing, 12,000, 24,000, and I had more. There's more tables. I didn't want to spend too much time on it on this video. The journals, Science and Nature, volume, all peer-reviewed journals, and it's irrefutable. Phantom leaf effect in Kirlian photography. As I said, I knew Thelma Moss, and this book was written in 72, 73, and this one was 78. And there's somewhat of a difference between. She finally mastered it after I told her what we had found, Gary Sullivan and myself had found, about the frequency, using a frequency generator on the leaf to find out what the frequency is, and then use that, and they had to photograph it very fast. Within 2 to 4 seconds, you'd see the phantom if you hit the right frequency, and then it would fade away. So here is one example here. Here's the phantom, and here's the matter part. So what this proves, and why a lot of physicists try to say, don't look here, it doesn't exist, it's a remnant or whatever. And she proved it's not a remnant, and I had enough people that I'd known firsthand that had done this, and I knew they weren't lying. They were professionals about this whole thing. This, as well as the clock cycle I showed you, prove the universe is the product of information. Once you find the clock cycle, technically, I don't need anything more than the clock cycle to prove the universe is the product of information. The clock cycle shouldn't be there unless we're in a synchronous system and you got a computer and you've got a clock cycle. It's irrefutable. This is irrefutable. What this means is the matter part of the signal that makes up that leaf, I think it was a coleus plant which she used to use all the time, is being transmitted the same coordinates in time and space as what we'd call the soul or the consciousness. But it takes about a few seconds for this dihole that contains the information and transmits it to correct it. Now I go into that a little bit later in the video, but this alone and this phantom here and the others I have, this was one done by Thelma Moss's employee, John. And this is early, back in 72, 73. After that, she says in this book, they had no problem. After I told her some clues on how to do this thing, she said in here, basically they had no problem producing copious amounts of phantoms all the time because they knew how to do it. This one I got from and corresponded with. I sent him a copy of my book, Reality Revealed. And this guy, Andrea, is the founder of Israeli Brazilian Institute of Biopsychological Research. And he sent me the picture. And the top part was cut off. And you see the matter part here. And then you see the faint outline of the rest of the conscious part of the leaf. And again, the only way this could happen is that you have two informations. You have one that has to do with the matter part of a living thing, and then you have the conscious part, which is another carrier wave, basically, that produces what we call the soul or the entity. By the way, he loved my book. Anyway, number 4, this is from our my Japanese friend, and he had children that were able to throw pictures onto film, and there wasn't a camera, it was all sealed up. And I mentioned it in the previous video. So anyway, this is what his device looked like. This is one of the kids throwing, they show him a picture and then he throws a conscious, his mind into the camera or the film, and it produces an image. Now, this is some of the results. He showed a picture of this, and this is what the person produced, the kid produced. Got some of it here. This is more or less perfect. This is the target. Stare at that. This is what he threw into the film. Here was a picture of a street scene. Did it, no cars. The buildings are there. Sign, not quite make it, but this sign made it. But there's no light. So the question is, this is in the light chapter on the videos. What is light? The question is what's light? There's no photons here. He put thoughts and created the image on the film. That's how he did it. This was interesting. Show him a picture of a building. It's ground level. But the image that he created on the film was above, like from a helicopter, which was kind of interesting. Oh, by the way, I want to show you if you think he wasn't a good scientist. He is. He did tractor feeds of all the subjects. The whole thing's in Japanese, by the way, unfortunately. But you could see that he is a serious scientist, seriously studied this thing, and this book, this one has a lot of pictures in here. Let me see if he's got them. Yeah, he's got a whole bunch in there, a whole bunch, loads he sent me. See? So he was very happy when he got a copy of my book. He basically said, this is the only thing that makes any sense of what we're seeing. The same thing was true with Thelma Moss. Anyway, fifth one, scientists found that they said quasars, but also galaxies, because a quasar creates a galaxy. They all seem to line up. The rotational axis lines up. Over 100 quasars or galaxies, and they all line up like this. Now, that's not by chance, by accident. That's by design. You're looking at a program. You're going to understand what this is all about in probably a part 11 when I deal with how I think you can go back in time, how some people have done it. This is how you know your science and philosophy is wrong and has hit a dead end. The universe should not exist, scientist says. And I showed this when I was doing this video at the time, one of the other videos. But anyway, it goes through here. When you come to this kind of conclusion, you know you got a dead philosophy. But now you know why. All of them from Newton on were all brainwashed to think one way, a matter-oriented theory of existence. That is why the Catholic Church promoted Aristotle, because they knew who really wrote it. And that's why it was so holy. And that, unfortunately, is the thing that causes this disaster. Why you look at phenomena in the universe and you can't figure it out because the picture you have, which is the philosophy, is wrong, so you don't know where to put the pieces of this puzzle together and where they go. With this information theory of existence, the reason why I was able to figure out so much that all these great scientists could not is because I have this information theory of existence, which I call the theory of multidimensional reality. Now we're getting to the electric universe stuff. My purpose here is so they understand where the excess electrons are coming from for their theory, because I don't believe they ever covered that, or they stayed away from it, one or the other. Okay. The problem is this. This is gold atoms. The atom's already created. What you're looking at here is the electron shell, not what's going on in the center of this thing. This is a hydrogen atom, and this is where all this is happening, and it creates this electron shell around it, and this is what you get. So the problem is, from here on, you can use classical physics. That's how we build buildings, roads, bridges, equipment, airplanes, rockets. Classical physics is fine. Where you run into troubles from here back, when you try to explain how the matter is created, is where they fall apart. You need an information theory of existence here, or the theory of multidimensional reality, same thing, in order to figure out what's going on here and how matter is created. Now, the other thing you're going to notice, the model that creates this stuff, in my theory, is the same one for planets and stars. You don't have to create a brand new theory. It's the same one. It's like what all those scientists were saying, you know, we don't have a unified theory to explain it all. Now you know why, because they were all brainwashed to think of a matter theory of existence thanks to Aristotle and the Catholic Church. The problem with quantum mechanics and nuclear physics is this is the spectral lines of gold. I have a real thick loose leaf book of a Russian table, looks like this. There's a copy of it, of all the elements. It was back to 1970 or something like that, but it was good enough. The red line here, between here and here, is in the visible spectrum. Now, you're not seeing all the frequencies. That's the problem. Here's iron, 4,169 spectral line frequencies that we know of. Now, the National Bureau of Standards has a little higher number because they have more newer equipment, so they're slightly larger in the numbers, but the Russian table is good enough, and I actually counted all this stuff. So if this thing is 4,169, let's call it 4,200 spectral line frequencies, then how come astatine is 2? Now, one brilliant physicist said, I had heard the theory that the outer shell of the electrons is absorbing the other shells, and therefore we don't see all the spectral lines. This guy had to be a total idiot, because if that was the case, then how come uranium with 992, I guess they didn't get his memo. What do you think? Or plutonium, 754 spectral line frequencies. Huh? How do you like that? And they're pretty close in weight, too. So they're all over the place. The one thing you tell right off the bat, this is probably, if astatine, which weighs a lot more, probably has a lot more spectral line frequencies. In other words, more information. The reason why this weighs more than that is because it's more information. That's why. So, like Einsteinium, 9 spectral line frequencies? Amazing. I scratch my head also. They have never been able, the physicists, to connect the spectral line frequencies with the atoms and their model in quantum mechanics. They can't do it. They can do it with, I think, hydrogen, maybe helium. That's it. After that, forget it, and they never talk about it. So, now to the model of how matter is created in this dimension. Information in the dihole. This would represent a device inside this thing that behaves like our GPUs, a graphics processor unit, the video card. Like our CPUs in our computers today are from 1 to maybe 3 gigabytes per second. But we don't perceive reality like that fast. There's no way. So the video card takes all this information and basically puts a reality together, especially if you're doing the current day video games or virtual reality games. This basically is the same thing. It's creating the reality that we're in right now. There's a transmission dimension, which I don't know how long it is or if it's really something that's being transmitted. It just may entirely be in the computer. And then when it crosses this imaginary x-axis, it blows out, and all the frequencies that make up the element shows up as an atom. This here is my model of how this thing works. The y-axis is the carrier wave that contains the information. That. The spikes here, every time it crosses the x-axis, immediately I saw it, this is Planck's constant. So Planck's constant up here, which is basically energy is Planck's constant times frequency. And so either Planck's time is between the positive and the negative, or proton, neutron, or between proton and proton. I don't know, and I don't know. Somebody's going to figure it out. It would mean just that this number would be double this. If this turned out to be it, then it would be something a little different. I mean, be double the size. And this is what it is. It's 5.39 times 10 to the minus 44 seconds. That is beyond picoseconds. Okay. Now, Dr. Stoke from University of New York at Stony Brook, I was in correspondence with him. He actually sent me photographs that I reproduced in God's Day of Judgment book as well as Reality Revealed. They're very helpful. I think he's the first one to invent how to take diffractograms of atoms. And I show that in series 4. I didn't put it on this slide. But what was interesting about this one, I counted 20 of these spikes here. And I'd already thought about, this thing doesn't stay in one location. This thing is stepping through around this thing. So this waveform basically traces out this toroid shape like this. So we just don't know how fast it's doing it. We don't know if it's a Planck's time. Each one of these, and collectively, it makes this toroidal shape, which we'd see maybe as just a round ball. But that was very interesting to me. So each one of these spikes may only be, for this element, 20 steps around, but it's going so fast, it just appears to us as a toroid shape. Now this toroid shape, and this model, is the same thing that's going on in the center of a planet and the center of a star, and probably the center of a quasar too. So with the theory of multidimensional reality, it's the same theory applied to each thing. You don't have to create a new one or dream something up. Other thing, in video series 2 on the Hebrew alphabet, this model, 22 views of this waveform, creates the 22 symbols or letters of the Hebrew alphabet. What Moses pulled out of that cave was work from a highly advanced previous civilization that was probably no less than 10 million to 20 million years more advanced than us. In other words, I want all those PhDs in physics and masters in physics to realize you don't know how the universe really works. They did. And you can't argue it. There's no way that a late Bronze Age man is going to come up with this and 22 views of this thing. And if you watch video series 2, probably the most important one I did, you realize you're not dealing with a bunch of primitive people 3,310 to 5 years ago. Now, any good mathematicians out there, there's never been a connection between pi, circle, and the natural log e to the x, the delay in propagation. I explain it in video series 1, what e to the x is and what it represents. So, back to our little stepping this waveform as it goes around very fast. So, Planck's constant 1, or position 1, then a brief period, either Planck's time or something like that. Later you have another position. And this is time right here. So, but as you can see, as it steps around, it's pi. It makes a circle. So, in essence, pi is formed by the delay in propagation, the natural log, as matter or information comes into this dimension. That's the connection between pi and the natural log. The natural log forms the pi, forms pi. So some clever mathematician out there, when I mathematically express it, don't forget to give me credit on the theory of multidimensional reality, because I'm the one who told you how it works. Here's xenon and radon. I like to call this one a gasmatron, just in honor of that movie. Anyway, the other thing about, so all the action is happening right here in the middle, where that center modulation point is for the atom. And it creates a bunch of electron shells around it. Now that's important to remember what I'm saying. But this is exactly what's going on with the center of the Earth. We have a DE, F1 and F2 layers of, they're basically electron layers at a frequency above the atmosphere. And any radio astronomer or shortwave radio operator knows about it, and they use it. AM engineers for AM radio stations have to know it, and they use the skip to wind up sending their signal far away. In fact, when myself and Dave Tyrell were gold mining in the Klondike, and I think it was 1967, we actually heard Wolfman Jack, who was broadcasting from Tijuana. He said 50,000 watts, but I think it was more than that, because we heard him in the Yukon Territory and northern British Columbia. That's one hell of a skip, but that's how they use these layers. If they do it right, they can send their signal really far away. But these layers are here because that tells you right off the bat there cannot be an iron core in the center of the Earth. An iron core doesn't irradiate radio frequencies, and it's uniform around the Earth. Okay, back to it. Let's say a stable atom is something like between here and there. In other words, I think there's always an opening here, a little bit of an opening here. This would be as if it was an absolute zero. So information comes in to a center modulation point. And, oh, by the way, on the Earth thing, I'll explain in a few minutes. The transmitter for this thing, for the center of our Earth, may only be 20 or 40 miles in diameter, that's all. But anyway, I think as you add energy, either kinetically, what they do in an atomic or hydrogen bomb, or electrically, this toroid shape, the hole in the middle, gets larger and larger. Someplace between here and there, I don't think the atom can be modulated, and it demodulates, basically disappears. But what does it leave behind? It left behind a whole bunch of electrons. That's your source of the electrons. So, as you add energy and stuff like that, this is what's going to happen. Now we get to planets. The Earth does not have a solid metal core. For this reason, I knew Professor Boosie from UCLA spoke to him. He even gave me tear sheets from some of his journal articles, and we spoke. And there's so many problems with the convection theory of gravitational field. It's embarrassing for anyone to wind up teaching it because it's so blatantly wrong. One, if there were convection currents inside this layer, then you'd have multiple north and south poles all over the place. It would look ridiculous, and that's not the case. Also, the theory is dependent on ample a number of earthquakes to drive this convection current. There aren't. So there were other reasons also, and I mentioned some of them to Boosie, and but he's just left it the way it is, you know, publish and perish. So what's going on here? Well, with antenna theory, if you know the wavelengths here, the antenna is like half the distance. So it came out to either 20 or 40 mile in diameter is the center of this thing. This is more like a plasma. Very heated. There's no way the electrons or the atoms could exist for more than picoseconds or milliseconds until it demodulated. Here, probably true for the first few miles of this, and then finally you have this molten mass which convects through to the outer mantle here. The core is supposedly 1,516 miles in diameter, but they really don't know. This is really guesswork. And what does it create? It's not an iron core at all. See this, the periodic table? All these elements this thing's creating. That's why we have all these elements on the crust of the Earth. Where do you think it came from? Other part. Not only DE, F1 and F2 layers around the Earth, but also around the equator of the Earth. Now they found this with satellites, and I put up that 5 degrees north of south out here, they had the static crashes. And it was emitted from the center of the Earth. Again, proof that there's no way it's a solid iron core. Something's transmitting and creating a tremendous voltage. And that's why I don't want people to build any caves and stuff like cave systems exactly on the equator, even a couple of degrees, 1 or 2 degrees north or south of it, in case at the time of the reversal, it really sends a lot of voltage out through the ground and coming out like that. That's the reason why. Now, this is how far the magnetic field of the Earth goes out. And we're happy it does, because any solar flares, the magnetic field directs it to north and south poles. Also, some of it, I guess, pushes away. But that's how the voltage is being created. Now, this is what a magnet, a toroidal magnet does and what it looks like. So the fields are like this. Now, the electric universe and a few others wind up thinking that when this reversal happens or some disaster happens, they don't really say the reversal, that these arcing electric fields, lightning, are going to come across and scar the land and create deep sea canyons, canyons on the Earth, and it's just blatantly not true. Every geologist and geophysicist knows that mechanism. It's called water erosion. We see it in real time. But I think the other part is, when I saw this, I said, somebody flunked Electronics 101. Electrostatic fields are not parallel to magnetic fields. They're perpendicular. They're 90 degrees out of phase from the magnetic field. Why did they draw this? I thought about some of the stuff in the electric universe. Some is right and some is blatantly wrong. Did they use some stuff like saying a comet is electronic ball or electrostatic ball? It's not. I mean, European space agencies and the Japanese both landed on one. It was P-67, I think. And half of it is organic material, and the rest is those glass beads, in water. So, I implore you, if you're part of or the leadership in the electric universe stuff, you should drop this stuff. It doesn't create canyons and stuff like that. At the time of the reversal, this is called a lightning cell. We actually had one here in Jacksonville like 2 or 3 years ago. Like every 2 to 3 seconds with a lightning strike. And at the time of the reversal, it's probably going to look like this, but it's uniform all around the Earth. This is what lightning does and what it looks like. This is when lightning goes through a beach, and it basically fuses the silicon, the sand, together like this. Here's another example on a beach. This, actually, guy has a museum. It's about 15 feet here. And this is what it does. It makes a strike, and then it branches off, and it basically disperses the 20 or 30,000 amps and God knows how many volts in the ground. And that's what this thing does. But it does not create valleys and canyons and stuff like that. It just does not. And this is Series 4, Part 6B. It does not create these things, which oceanographers and geologists like to forget, because the only way these things can form is there was no Atlantic Ocean there for the water to run off the continent and make these huge canyons. Some of these things are as big as the Grand Canyon. So it didn't, by the way, these canyons run east and west. By the picture they drew here, these canyons should be running north and south, but none of them do. They run east and west on both shores, on both sides of the continent. Okay, now stars. Same thing's going on in here. Center modulation point with a massive amount of information, multiple carrier waves carrying a lot of information. And the only place it starts creating what they call matter is this shell here, which is the corona. We're not talking Corona beer, by the way, a chromosphere. This is what a close-up picture of the surface of the sun looks like. A boiling mass of matter. All types of matter, too. This is in Series 1, Part 1D. So, same principle, same thing going on. The center of the Earth, center of an atom, just massively greater in a star. Now, this thing actually has a movie to it. I'm going to see if I can get the thing to work. This is what our sun is doing. It's pulsating. That's what this is supposed to represent. When I was at the University of Washington, they actually had a video, and actually these things were like 5-sided geometric shapes oscillating. And the Russians were, I think, one of the people who discovered it was oscillating at 2 hours and 40 minutes, and a lot of other frequencies were found. If that's the case, you know right off the bat, this isn't random atomic bombs or hydrogen bombs going off. This is something inside the star, a center modulation point with lots of different frequencies, and you see that. This is the 1914 eclipse. This is a famous one. This is the one that they were testing the general theory of relativity of Einstein. And anyway, this is probably both particles and electrons exciting the particles around the sun. Just like the Earth has a big magnetic field that protects us, it looks like our sun does the same exact thing, and NASA's Voyager discovered magnetic bubbles at the edge of the solar system, well, beyond the solar system, and which protects us from whatever this thing is represented. This is obviously an artist's drawing. which I always seem to take with a grain of salt. Galaxies, same thing is going on here. This is a composite drawing, and I'm going to show you what it is. This is what it looks like in optical vision. This is a radio signal. They make that in purple. And this is X-rays, kind of a red tinge they've given it. And you can see these things coming off of it, which means you've got excited electrons in here, and radio, obviously, electrons also. So you see a composite. So this is I can't call it planetary plane. This is the center modulation point. This is the toroid that actually represents the star, a lot of stars, and this is the energy came out of the middle of this thing. Here's another example. Galaxy 3C31 or NGC 383. This is not gas coming out of here. I think this is really stars. Another galaxy. This is a blow up of what's going on in here. And you can see the toroid shape. Stars blowing out of the middle of this thing. Same thing here. Composite drawing of only the infrared and the visible light one. And finally, supposedly this is a model of our own Milky Way. So you have the stars along the plane of this thing. The center modulation part would be in the middle. And this is X-rays and radio frequencies coming out of it. And I think they've seen this in other galaxies. They assume ours is going to be the same. There's no black hole. Kiss that off. Even Stephen Hawking would say there's no black hole. Call it acceleration disk. This is really where the stars and planets are. And that's it. Basically, you're looking at it. Now, what's important is the same theory that explained what's going on in the center of an atom, the same one that explains what's going on in the center of the Earth or any planet, but just on a massive scale. And then what's going on in the center of a star, again, even greater. And then finally, it's going on all over the universe. Now, this is a computer-generated image. I think it was Max Planck's Institute who did this. They took all the information from all the astronomers of the galaxies, and they put it together in a composite drawing, again, of X-rays, ultraviolet light, infrared, and you'll notice there's connections between these galaxies. Just like they show the quasars and galaxies were lining up, it makes this pattern. Now, the next video is going to be on how I think it's done, of how you can go back in time and how it was done, and both in the Bible and, believe it or not, my own and my wife's and my son's own personal experience, what happened to us. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. The foundation's right now working on the concrete. Steve Walter says he's got it up to 16,000 psi. If you donate it, it'll be going towards the cost of testing, shipping, and buying him supplies for the concrete. Right now we're looking for slag, and if you have any, or know a steel plant that's got slag, both air-cooled or water-cooled, granulated or powdered, let me know. And that does it. And in spite of my cold, not cold, my ailment, I think I did this okay without any coughing.